to try and find out, okay, hey, listen, I'm buying my new building. We're 2 weeks out. I need my money back to roll into this new property. What do I do? And I'm calling and calling and calling. Nobody's answering their phones. Nobody's answering their emails. I have my lawyer send them a nasty gram and everything like that. Nothing. So I'm like, man, I'm just going to call the owner of the company and find out where I'm at. So I Google the name of the owner of the company, right? And because I'm like, well, just find this guy. I'll just find out where he's at. I Google him. First thing, owner of 1031 Exchange Company found with third-degree burns roaming around residential neighborhood.
As an operator, I know other investors are romanticizing multifamily investing, and I'm looking to learn from other investors' mistakes. I know you are too, and you found the right place. Welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Hey everybody, and welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got the pleasure of having Math Faircloth with me today. Matt, how are things in your neck of the woods?
They're good, man. I'm sitting up here in Trenton, New Jersey, and things are wonderful in Trenton, New Jersey today, Jerome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Man, I'm excited. We talked on the phone, and then
Yeah.
a few weeks later you were down here, got to hang out with you on a walk on a 300 unit. It was kind of easy, man. But, before we get into all of that, do me a favor and tell the listeners how they can get in contact with you if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing.
I love you do that in the beginning. Every host does that at the end. I love you doing that right up front in case people listen to the whole show and they can just say, hey, I want to get in touch with Matt. Thank you. So that's just, we put it all on our website, man. It's all out there. DeRosaGroup.com, DeRosaGroup.com. For those of you that are that are awesome enough to be watching me and Jerome on video, just look right back there behind me, DeRosaGroup.com. That's got everything you need to know. You can buy my book, Raising Private Capital, on that site. You can learn more about investing with us, and you can learn more about some of the educational tools that we have available too. And obviously our YouTube channel and my wife's podcast called The Real Estate Invest Her Show is available on our website as well.
Got to give her a shout out.
I got to give my bride the props, man. She's the foot up my butt that put me where I'm at, so.
Man, this is going to be a great show. So give the listeners a little bit of context. What have you been working on for the past 15 or 20 years, man?
Well, right, just hanging out, working on real estate. I quit my job in 2005. I got my degree in engineering. I went to Virginia Tech, not too far from where you're sitting down there in North Carolina. Graduated from there and moved to Greensboro, and lived right off of Wendover Ave. Right after I graduated and was a traveling sales rep. I mean, I've always been just reasonably good in sales and explaining complicated things and making them seem fairly simple. So I sold these enormous compressed air systems that go into factories. So I went into all these different factories all across the country selling compressed air. And then I got transferred to Philly, met my wife, and she got me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that completely changed my life. And so that got me into the concept of real estate investing. My very first deal was just a single family home that I lived in, rented out two bedrooms to two buddies of mine. And I lived in one room by myself. And just while we were dating, and I was living there, I ended up living there for free, actually making $60 a month. And just that turned my head to the power of real estate by just having my two roommates pay me rent. This is amazing. It was such a life hack. To be able to reduce my expenses drastically to the point where I was making a good salary, but my cost of living was zilch. So I was able to pay off all my credit cards, student loans, all that. And that completely sold me. And so we started the wheels turning and started buying more while we were dating, and then got married, and I quit my job and started the DeRosa Group right after that. And then we've been in mainly residential housing and have slowly grown. We're not one of these folks that just took a weekend course about buying apartment buildings and are now trying to do our first deal. You try to buy a couple 100-unit apartment complexes, our very first deal. That's not us. We've grown up into landlording. through the space. We've, small landlording, big landlording. I've done a lot of lease showings and collections and like physical work on properties myself as I came up through the business. And we've just grown slowly into larger real estate. And now we're blessed enough to be taking down larger apartment buildings. We're buying, as I met you face to face for the first time, on a 336 unit that we have under contract in Winston-Salem.
So you're talking my language now. You grew up. You didn't just go buy a 300 unit building on your first deal.
Right. And so a lot of people did, man. A lot of people that are out there right now just took a couple of courses or whatever and ran to the back of the room and said, I want to buy apartment buildings too. And now they're apartment building experts, But no, I came up, as I think that you have done as well. I came up through the tranches of the beginning of real estate. And just as I became more comfortable, I expanded my boundaries and got into bigger stuff.
Wow. So do you know anybody that actually was successful at running to the back of the room and then go take down a big building on their first deal?
Yeah, man. A lot. You and I both know these people.
I
Yeah.
don't know anybody.
Huh?
I don't know anybody.
Oh, come on. I can't do it on the air, but a lot of the people that are out there, man, right now that have podcasts and shows and like are blasting stuff out all over YouTube and everything, not YouTube, but mostly Facebook. Look at the apartment buildings I'm buying. They got started buying mid-size multi, and they probably worked on somebody else's team, or they probably worked underneath somebody else to learn how to do it. But they didn't start on singles or quadruplexes or even 10 or 15 units. Their first deal were singles and stuff. We're like big apartment buildings.
Different. When I say knowing somebody, I don't know anybody who ran to the back of the room and then were the lead on their deal that's 100 units.
No, that's true. That's true. Now there's ways around that. Like here's what I tell people. There's two ways to expand in real estate. If you want to get bigger, number one is to double your portfolio every time you do a deal, right? So buy a single family home, man, do it, find good management, structure it out, maybe do some of it yourself, and then slowly grow from there, right? And if you double up every time you do a deal, man, you're going to double up pretty quick, right? And then you do 10, buy a 10 unit. Now I got to buy a 20 because Matt said I got to double up every time I do a deal, right? So you got to double up every time. That's, I think, the smarter way to expand. The other way you can get into real estate and get into bigger stuff is by joining a team. Now, I've got people that are on my real estate team that have very little real estate exposure up until they joined me, but they had the mechanisms and the equations and the wiring. They were set up the right way to be who I needed them to be in that seat on the bus, And so I'm like, hey, wouldn't you love to be on a real estate team? My man Hervé Francois, who is you met him. Hervé was a stock analyst on Wall Street. Yeah. Okay. Not before he joined me, but then, he'd retired from that, right? This is his second career. I pulled him out of retirement, to get back in with me and everything like that. But he was more of a Wall Street guy. But he learned how to analyze on Wall Street. All he did was analyze businesses and markets and sectors and do risk analysis. So I'm like, you could help me find the right markets in the US, I think, and he did. And so I pulled him out of that and put him in that seat. Now, people can join a multifamily team if they can add to that team in some strength that they have. But they're, as you said, they're not going to be driving the bus. There'll be a seat on the bus. The driver of the bus should be somebody who's been in this business and has a few grays like I do. So.
No, I don't like when people get sold a bill of goods, right?
You're right. Oh. You're right. No, and I think that you can't. Here's the thing. I think that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. And thank you for going there with that, because you're right. I think there's people that are doing a lot of, and offline, I'll tell you who I'm talking about, but I'm just too much of a gentleman to mention your names right now. But there's people out there that have picked up thousands of units in the last couple of years, and they're out there just screaming it from the mountaintop, you can do this too. And I'm over there on the other mountaintop going, you got lucky, like that's it, right? And there's no way anybody else can do what they do without losing, that can try to do what you do. And because you haven't seen a market crash yet or a market dip, my friend from the mountaintop over there that has 5,000 units they've acquired in the last 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is, right? We'll see. Call me again in 5 years. We'll see where you're at. But I think that the smarter way to grow is the way you and I just described. It's not to run to the back of the room. I don't believe in run to the back of the room mentality or in guruship or anything like that. But there's a lot of that going on. You're right. So
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many different places that we could take
whatever
this
we want.
conversation. The first one, so I was watching Avengers yesterday because I wanted to,
Yes, I do too.
and I saw Captain America, and the first thing I saw in your background was the shield. Where did
Yeah.
that come from, and what's that about?
Sure. So I have been a fan of. Now I was not I was into comic books when I was a kid, but I was in more into. I don't know why. I'll just go there. I was into GI Joe when I was a kid. That was like the comic book I read. I did not get into superheroes as a kid, but when they started bringing Marvel back about, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, whatever, with the first Iron Man, I don't know what it was, but that concept of superherodom in my 30s, it was my opportunity to be a little boy again or whatever. I just jumped on those Marvel movies that have been made, since about 12 years ago. And I really fell in love with a lot of the characters. But the one that really jumped out at me, and I researched him, his story in the movie is very similar to his story in the comic books and everything like that, is Captain America. And here's why. Almost every character in comic books in general had something. They were either born into strength, right? Superman, he was just born from another planet, came to Earth. He's like, you can't mess with me because I was born on that other planet over here. Your planet's inferior, so I'm like, that's what I am, right? Look at what that is, right? That's Superman. Look at other people. They had something happen to them inadvertently. The Hulk got bit by or got injected, and this guy got bit by a spider or whatever, and they were a normal guy like you and me and had their flaws or whatever, and then they became amazing, right? Captain America was an amazing human being and a big fighter and a strong soul inside,
Uh-huh.
right? And they did something to him. The work they did, all it did was really exemplify what he was. He already was courageous, a hero. He was just a tiny little guy, but they did that work to him that made him, you know, and so what I like about him was it just was putting his existing strengths under a microscope. What the human he already was. And an example of that is when the Red Skull took the same serum, he became this dark evil guy, right? And Captain America took the same thing and became a very strong hero, like a man for justice, right? And what I identify with that about getting your strength inside first. That's where strength has to come from. It doesn't have to come from the things you see on YouTube or whatever. You got to feel strong here, then you can exemplify it out. So I identify a bit with Captain America in his journey, if you will. So,
So, superpower.
huh?
What's your superpower?
I said it before, explaining super complicated things. I'm a good motivator. I'm good at making people laugh. I can bring energy when I need to. And that, so I think I'll say that I can bring energy to a room when I need to bring it, and I can take something very complicated and make it seem fairly simple enough to where most people can get their head around it. I was almost a teacher. I almost taught physics. I love physics, so I almost taught physics in high school, and until I decided to go into sales, but that was my other thing that I wanted to do. And that's what teachers do. They take super complicated things like physics or how an airplane works and explain it to a 10th grader. So yeah, those are my two superpowers.
Perfect, man.
Yeah.
This is going well.
Yeah. You're an Avengers guy too. What's your favorite Avengers movie?
I don't know.
It's hard to pick. You can't pick your favorite, right?
Right? Like
Yeah.
the whole Thor thing or Thanos thing was pretty cool. Like all the
Endgame. Endgame was not Endgame. I'm sorry. Infinity War was a great movie. And even though the bad guy won at the end of that movie, like the way they wound it up, I mean, it was like, whoa, that's a good movie. And just they told a phenomenal story. And if I'm flipping channels and it's on, I'm gonna stop.
now and then you gotta stop.
Yeah, I got to watch a little bit. Give me a half an hour of it, Yeah, but the Thor things are good too. I'm a fan all the way across. Whatever they produce, I'm gonna love. Just like Star Wars, whatever they got, I'm gonna love. I'm gonna be a fan. So just stop right there. Whatever it is, it's gonna be amazing to me. So I'm never gonna poo-poo any Marvel movie or Star Wars movie. You can't get me to do
Got it.
it.
So now that we've established that you're a superhero,
Thank you.
right? And you've got a wife who's helping with
I
increase
do.
diversity in the real estate game, right?
Yeah.
Invest Her is a network completely dedicated to women moving into
Yeah. Uh-huh. That's
investment.
it.
So, what happened in your household that made this something that needed to be manifested?
Huh. She's always been my wife got her master's degree in social work. And so she has always been a voice for women, be that when she was in college, battered women or women that were, addicted to bad things and opiates or whatever. She spent some time in Fiji doing volunteer work. It was all before I met her. And then when I met her, right when right after we got married, we went and spent a week. We got married right when Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans. And so we went and spent a week in New Orleans fixing up houses when Hurricane Sandy came through New Jersey. We spent a lot of time. So my wife's always been the advocate of giving back to the needy. And she's always been driving us to do that. And not that I didn't want to do that, but she's been the one that's like, let's take action. So when DeRosa started to take off, and not to like pound my chest, but we got into a situation where she didn't need to work anymore. And when we first started, we lived off of her income, because we live below our means. We did something Americans have kind of lost sight of. We live below our means off of one person's income, like that whole concept is so far into American. I know, wait, you got to spend all your dollars you got. You got to live all the way up here, right? You got to have the new car, the big house, the new this, the new that, right? No. We live way below our means on just her salary. But then when we didn't need to do that anymore, after we had our kids, she wanted to find something to get herself into. She didn't want to go back to the work she was doing in her prior life. So she wanted to do something that was to benefit women. And she knew real estate because she'd been helping me for all this time. And she believes that, there's certain stats that she can spout off, like women outlive men by 7 years on average, right? So but almost all women in a household do not control the finances. So, and don't know, if you were to poll most women, they wouldn't be able to tell you how much money is in their household 401k, like their husband's and theirs, or how much money is like how much equity in their home is paid off or whatever. They wouldn't know their personal finances. And even though they're likely to outlive their husband, so that means that they're going to be left having to figure out their financial situation. My mother is a widow because when my dad passed, my mother had to figure out our finances, but she didn't know any of that when my dad died. She didn't know any of of our personal finance in our house, so she had to figure it out. So my wife wanted to be a voice for the wealth for women, so women can kind of stand on their own, whether they need to in the world or whether they just want to have their own wealth building initiatives. Because we've gotten beyond a world where men have to be the only breadwinners in a family. Women can be breadwinners and can be the only breadwinner too, or can win more bread than the husband does, whatever it is. We're beyond the old school society of the man having to earn all the money. And so she wants to be a voice for wealth for women and income streams for women, and also put a highlight on women that are already successful in the real estate world, because as you and I agree, there's plenty of successful women in real estate, but not enough of them get the spotlight. So.
Yeah, and so, continuing down that thread, one of the things that I was most impressed when I met you guys over there in Winston was
Yep.
diversity on your team. You've got people
Mm-hmm.
from all different ages,
Yep.
ethnicities, and it's just like really cool
Mm-hmm.
to see everybody harmonious. And so, is that something that you're doing intentionally, or is it just happening by circle?
Well, I try not to I try not to go for talent based on like, I look deep as far as I can. I don't intentionally say, I've heard companies say this, and I think that you kind of end up in a bad road, or you end up putting the wrong butt in the wrong seat sometimes. If you're like, I need a woman in this seat, or I need an African-American female or an African-American male in this job. I think that we network wide enough that I try to network beyond networks that are associated with color or whatever. And I tend to, because of my background that you and I talked about, I'm comfortable with older people, younger people, white people, black people, Asian people, Indian people, whatever. I'm comfortable in all those environments because of how I grew up. And so I think that I gravitate to people with just, I still see, I can't say I don't see color, because I think people that say that are kind of full of it. But I still see it, of course, but I see beyond it, you know? Like when I look at you, I see an African-American male, but I see beyond that. I see a successful man with an awesome smile that's really personable and a fun guy to hang out with. That's what I see. I see well beyond that. So when I see Hervé Francois, I see a man, I see his resume. When I spouted off on his resume before, I didn't mention that he was African-American,
Right.
By the way, he's from Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't know if he told you, he's an even more interesting story than that. I don't know if that helps, but I think that we need to look beyond those things to try and find talent, because there's a lot of talent out there, that's beyond racial barriers and beyond gender barriers. So
I appreciate you saying
yeah.
that. And, we were talking a little bit about that big old flag behind you. And just some people are trying to take ownership of the flag, but it's for
Yeah. Was I right about that? Do you feel that way? Do you feel that way that like that certain initiatives have said, like they fly the American flag and that means a certain thing,
Yeah, I think people have tried to tie meanings to flags just to
Yeah.
make them hang around. The Confederate flag's one of them, right? I mean,
I can't believe people are trying to defend that, man. They're like, oh, well, it's part of our heritage. Well, let me ask you a question. When you go to Germany, right? Do you see statues of Hitler? Or do they allowed to fly the swastika in Germany? You know what they fly in Germany instead of the swastika? They fly the stars and bars. They fly the Confederate flag in Germany because they're not allowed. The racists there fly the Confederate flag, right? That has become an emblem. Yes, it was an emblem during 1865 of the Confederate Army, but it's become an emblem of racism, and yes, the South, and I get other things too, but mostly, folks that are about the initiatives, the Confederacy. Sorry to go off on a tangent. We could bring it back to the American flag if you want.
No, I think it's important for somebody like you to, stay true.
Well, I've learned, you know what? We can even go, I'll go a cut deeper with you. I've learned that it's very easy for white men to not be vocal. Cause I can just, if I'm sitting in a circle of white men and they make like an off-color joke or an off-color comment or whatever, I can just roll my eyes and not say anything. I can do that, and I can let that uncomfortable moment roll. You can't. But I can. You can't stop being black, but I can pretend not to care for a minute, and I'll turn myself in, man. There's been times where it was easier or just didn't want to stir the pot or whatever, where I did that. And recently I decided, man, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm standing up, and I've always felt the way that I feel about things, and I've felt gravitated towards equality, but I'm like, you know what, man, enough's enough. I'm going to start getting vocal.
What's up, guys? It's your host, Jerome. I just want to let you know we launched Myers Methods in the fall of 2019 with the ambition to inspire a new breed of multifamily investor. If you are interested in getting into multifamily or scaling your current business, hop over to our website at myersmethods.com to grab your free 4-step guide on how to get the ball rolling in multifamily. Now let's get back to the episode.
So I did a big Facebook post about it. My wife has done a lot on her Invest Her community about racial diversity, and that. And so I'm being more vocal about racial inequalities and about just general inequalities in our country, and about things that we cling to that really we shouldn't, like having statues of Robert E. Lee sitting in cities. And let's really question how he got there. When was that statue built? By who? Who built that? Oh, it wasn't built in 1865, right after the Civil War. No, it was built in 1940 by a bunch of racist white people. That's who put that there, and like organizations like the Daughters of Confederacy built that. That's who put that there to create white supremacists. And it was years after the Civil War was over. So don't be throwing history in my face about this, about why these things were put there, or why street names have what they are, or why American bases are named Fort Bragg or Fort Hood or whatever, because they didn't name those things right after the Civil War. Sorry. I know I'm in a safe place. I can talk with you about it, and you and I can converse. Am I right? What do you think?
You're 3,000% right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen anybody celebrate somebody who lost a war nowhere.
Yeah, right. That's a good way to put it. Right. Let's celebrate people that tried to overthrow our country. Right.
sense. But and
Right.
talking about the wrongs, I feel like you've done enough deals where some things that didn't quite go to plan. You told me a story about a superhero that lives in your house, and so I'd love to learn more about this deal where you lost like $750,000.
Yeah, man. It happened kind of down there in North Carolina in Fayetteville, but that's where it ended. But I mean, briefly, I'll talk you through it. It was we did a 1031 exchange. We had a 18 unit in Northeast Philly. Okay. And bought it for $1 million, 50% occupied, completely beat up. I mean, just got in there and renovated the apartments and did what people like you and me do, just got in there and rolled up our sleeves and brought it back, and bought it for $1 million. Somebody came in and put it under contract with us for 1.5. No, he banged his head on my door to buy the property. And I didn't agree to sell it to him. I was like, no, I want to hold this for 5 years. I want to cash flow it. I'm very happy with it. I don't want to sell it. And he just banged his head on my door and he was like, listen, just say a stupid number. Just give me a stupid number for the house, for the property, like a number what's your walk? You just could not, you could not walk away from this price. And I was like, you know what? I bought it for $1 million. You give me 1.5 for it. We'll do a deal. And he was like, done. And I said, oh shit. Okay. Well, he said, yes. What do I do now? Because I told these investors it'd be a 5-year deal. And it was 3. I think we're like 2.5 years into a 5-year hold. Right. So I'm like, oh man, what do I do? So I think, okay, I'm chasing this other deal in North Carolina that's 198 units. I'll do a tenant in common where I sell this property and all the proceeds from that sale becomes some of the equity for the larger deal. And I still got to go raise some of the money that I need. But this sale would contribute a large portion of the equity to it. Right. So had it all lined up. We're good to go. And the 18 unit had investors with it. It was not just me. Had some investors in the deal with me. Sold it. Closed, rolled the money over to a 1031 exchange custodian that I had found online. They were well vetted, underwritten, and they had a good reputation, and they were good articles written about them and stuff like that. I mean, how well do you know? I mean, truth be told, I should have gone to like the biggest company in the world or the biggest whatever, but these companies had honestly a good price for doing their work, and they had a bunch of good press about them, and they had some good references. Fair enough, right? So my mistake was I didn't vet them deep enough, because it turns out that as I start to call them to try and find out, okay, hey, listen, I'm buying my new building. We're 2 weeks out. I need my money back to roll into this new property. What do I do? And I'm calling and calling and calling. Nobody's answering their phones. Nobody's answering their emails. I have my lawyer send them a nasty gram and everything like that. Nothing. So I'm like, man, I'm just going to call the owner of the company and find out where I'm at. So I Google the name of the owner of the company, right? And because I'm like, well, just find this guy. I'll just find out where he's at. I Google him. First thing, owner of 1031 exchange company found with 3rd-degree burns roaming around residential neighborhood. And I'm like, huh, what's that? So I dug deeper. Apparently this guy was in a residential neighborhood. Somebody like poured gasoline all over him and lit this guy on fire. Okay. And it was not his car. He was in a car, but it wasn't his car when they found him. Okay. He was burned up so bad, they put him in a coma. Okay. To keep him alive. And so I'm like, oh man, this poor guy, this guy's in a coma. Like, look what happened. Now he can't sign off on the release of my funds because he's in a coma. Right. So at first I'm like, I feel bad for this guy, whatever. Let me say a prayer for him. Hope he's okay. Let me think about it a little bit more and hope that it comes out. But then I do a little more digging, right? Because you know what, Jerome? People like you and me don't get lit on fire inside neighborhood in a car, right? Who does that happen to, right? Like, right? Like, you're like, wait a minute, that happens like to Pablo Escobar in a movie. That happens to like people in the Goodfellas. That doesn't happen to me or you or somebody just running upstanding businesses, right? So I started to run it through my head. I'm like, how did that guy end up in a car? Why was it in his car? And he was roaming around some neighborhood. Like, what? So I looked further into it, and I started to look on bigger podcasts. There was a bunch about it and a bunch about this guy and stuff. And it started to evolve. Just fast forward that I started to connect with a few other people that had money with this guy too. And we started to piece it together that this guy was running a Ponzi scheme. Okay. And he had $6.5 million of money tied up, of other people's money. I had $716,000 of my money, and then 6.5 million of all this money tied up in 1031s. What he was doing was he was taking the money into his account on a 1031 exchange. And then he was taking that money and buying himself self-storage centers and buying himself apartment buildings and buying real estate assets. And as more money would come in through new 1031 exchanges, he would refund the people behind. You know what I'm saying? He would take more. And as long as the money kept coming in, he was okay. He could keep feeding the people that wanted their money back. That's what a Ponzi scheme is. As long as you can keep raising, you're okay. When the money coming in stops, that's where you get caught. That's what happened to Bernie Madoff, right? And with this guy, what happened was he got caught in the fire. The fire is what stopped the money from flowing in. And that's when his team was like, hey, what are we supposed to do? We got all these people that want their money back and there's no more money coming in. What do we do? Right. And so long story short, me and all the $6.5 million people got together and we formed a class action suit and we sued this guy. And we've gotten 2 settlement checks so far. And it looks like we're going to get made whole again. But it was one of those rough roads, man. And so how about that? Should that be on Dateline NBC, or should that be on like American Greed or what?
It's insane. So why don't you get out the business at that point? Why do you? Because a lot of people. Because it wasn't just your money; it was the other too. But that could
be a lot of reasons. Why didn't I just fold up shop and say, you know what, this is a sign from God, I'm out of here, right? I don't know. It's a good point, right? And because the reason I'm pausing is because the thought never crossed my mind. But I can tell you that it wasn't just my money. I was a custodian of a bunch of other people's money that got locked up in that thing. So I just said, you know what, I am responsible for these people. And it's also what I know how to do. It's what I love doing. I love doing what I do in real estate. And this is just one of those awful speed bumps that comes up where you got to deal with it. I think that those are my reasons. And also I'm not a quitter. And I feel like the successful people, those that are successful in life, are those that just simply don't quit, that have awful things like this happen to them, but then try again. And if you look at the track record of most successful people, look at Abraham Lincoln. He lost every election that he ran in up until he ran for president. He just completely failure, then get elected president and change the world. Thomas Edison, failure. Like 10,000 times he tried to do something else. He tried to do different things to create light, and then it finally worked. So I've just never been a quitter. So that's why I didn't get out. But the hard day was I had to come home and tell my wife this, that they're like, hey, we just lost $750,000 of other people's money, but I'm going to figure it out. And also what I did, I had to call investors and tell them what happened. And then I also had to get in and I had to call them and say, listen, I just lost a bunch of your money, but I'm going to work it out. That's number one. Number two, I had to go home and tell my wife what happened. So yeah. No, those are 2 very difficult conversations, but I had to have them,
So how does that conversation go when you come home and tell the wife, hey,
so how was your day? Right? Yeah, right. Oh, not bad, honey. How about you? Oh, you lost No, I remember coming home. It was the middle of winter. So it was one of those days, kind of the winter would get dreary where it's dark out at 4:30, you're driving home in the dark. And I had to drive home in the dark and tell her what happened. I walked in the door and had a tear in my eye, and I told her, I was like, listen, it looks like this guy that was running this 1031 exchange company was running a Ponzi scheme, and he stole all of our money. And she flipped out. And I was telling you off the air that my son heard his mommy flipping out. I was like, what's the matter? And she kind of had to tell him through her tears that, daddy just lost a bunch of money for a bunch of his investors, and he's really sad about it. And so he went up to his room and got his piggy bank and brought it to me, so right. That gets you. Your kids see your pain and they want to help, and so this business is not for the faint of heart, and it sinks deep into your family and the culture of what this creates, the wins, the losses, and the sharing of the wins and sharing of the losses. propagates, and so you got to be able to bring this thing home, the wins too. I mean, I've brought nice steaks home and nice bottles of champagne and nice checks when we have wins, and we get to do fun things as a family to celebrate our wins. But as our losses too, my family becomes my shoulder to cry on. So yeah. But you know what? If I can trace it into what I did after that, right? What I told investors, because I could have just called them and said, "Hey guys, listen, we got robbed, and that knucklehead over there just stole a bunch of our money, and we're going to go after him, and we're going to class action suit him with all these other people, and they all have money too, and we're going to throw a bunch of money and a bunch of lawyers at him, and this guy has a bunch of assets, and he bought, he was smart enough to buy himself a bunch of townhouses and mobile home parks and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go take all those things, and we're going to, get our money back." That didn't feel right to do. It felt like this happened under my watch, and I'm the custodian of these people's money. So what I did, the new property we were buying had 30% was our carve out, me and my partner, was our share. The $750,000 was supposed to buy 18.5% ownership of the new property. So we gave them just about all of our side of the new company, of the new property. We just gave it to our investors. Okay, this is how you're covered. This is your collateral. So,
whoa.
Yeah, man. I put my investors first. I'll jump on a hand grenade for my investors. So,
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
about making it right.
It's about making it right. And I get asked that about, like, have you ever had a deal go bad? I'm like, hell yeah, man. Sit down. I'll tell you a story. Not just that, but I've had plenty of stuff not go exactly as planned, because there's just too many moving parts in real estate for things to go exactly as planned every time. If things in real estate go exactly the way that you're planning, you're not stretching hard enough. You're not playing a big enough game. That real estate, it gets a little squirrely, but as long as you're committed to your investors and are willing to stay in until it does work out, and keep pushing at it, then it's okay. It's okay that it goes a little sideways, a little left, a little right. Sometimes it does. It is what it is. But I think that with enough perseverance, you always come out on top with enough time.
Oh man. So was there a key process change that you guys have implemented to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Sure. I found that when that happened, this is a couple of years, like bordering on 3 years ago. When that went down, I was doing a lot of things myself, and I found that I do very little myself now. And I found that 1031 exchange custodian on my own, and I didn't vet them. I was just like, okay, not I vetted them. I had a phone interview with them, and I researched them, and I read their references and everything like that. But that was all the vetting that I did. I didn't go to my network. It could have been a simple Facebook post. Hey, does anybody know a 1031 exchange company? I could have just put it out to my network that way. I could have called my CPA, and said, hey, who do you use? Who do your clients use? And he would have recommended me to somebody, But unbeknownst to me, 1031 exchange, this is to your audience, 1031 exchanges are the most, it's where the most real estate theft happens, is in 1031 exchanges, because the 1031 exchange custodian, the folks that are the folks that are watching your money between transactions, those folks are actually very unregulated. You would think that they have to have a license a mile long and an MBA and a this and a that. No, it's very little you have to be a 1031 exchange custodian. I didn't know that. And so this dude just decided to start doing it, and just hung a shingle up and put good marketing out there and probably phony testimonials, and here we go. But at the end of the day, Jerome, what I've done differently is I do very little myself, and I cross-check everything.
Nice. And so the final question, and we've been all over
Sure.
this one. This has been an amazing interview. Is what words of wisdom would you have for the listeners?
Yeah. Well, I said it before, about, this is when you asked me why I didn't just hang up my hat. And don't get me wrong, man. I mean, I wouldn't be human if I didn't say those days haven't come where I've thought about, like, am I really want to be doing this? And immediately I'm like, yeah, I'm just having a dark moment. I want to do this. So the words of wisdom I have is, in your dark moment, don't quit. If you decide this business isn't for you, make it a well thought out decision, but don't quit in a dark time, because the dark times always make you want to quit. And those that are successful are the ones that have stayed in through the dark times to get to the good times and that. So I highly recommend that you never quit. And if you really feel like you have to, make sure you do it well thought out and get some support and thought around it. But I think that staying in this game a long time, even through the down times, and figuring it out is what's going to create success. So that's my words of wisdom.
Matt, this has been amazing. I can't believe we covered so much ground in such a short amount.
Yeah, it's fun, man. Yeah. We haven't even get into it. There's plenty of other directions we can go too. So next time, I'd love to come back on and talk some more shop with you.
Awesome, man. I look forward to you guys closing on that big deal.
And yeah, I'll be in your neighborhood more often.
Yeah, we can hang out and
like that
again and all that other good stuff. I look forward to you soon.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
You made it to this juncture, so you really love what we shared on this episode of Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Do us a favor, give us a 5-star rating, give us a review, and share this with somebody who's interested in multifamily investing. Until the next time, the pack is with you.